Welcome to this video. My name is Rav and I help people empower themselves. As I'm standing here in front of this camera, I'm hearing this voice inside of my head that says, Rav, please don't do this. Why are you just trying to make a fool of yourself? Haven't people had enough of you already? Stop it. No one's gonna even watch your videos anymore. Nobody cares. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. And that's all fear speaking. And that's why I wanted to make a video on this to kind of decode how fear stops us from being the best versions of ourselves in our life. So let's begin. Fear is something we all hate to deal with. Whenever fear comes, we try to go in the opposite direction. And it makes us feel very uncomfortable, it makes us hate ourselves, it makes us do things very irrational that we wouldn't do normally. That's why we always have this really hateful relationship with fear. But historically speaking and biologically speaking, fear is something that's ingrained within us. We can't ever hide away from fear. Fear was the most appropriate response for most situations that our ancestors faced with. And whenever they faced maybe wild animals or even like natural calamities, the best way to respond to that would be to either fight or flight. And that's the exact reaction that we still feel to this day. Except things has changed around us and we live in much safer places compared to where we were at before, right? But still the physiological symptoms are very similar, and instead of dealing with the fear and trying to act upon it, what we do is we just succumb onto the fear and instead try to distract ourselves and try to suppress the fear. And that's when it starts becoming the problem. Now we're gonna go into more depth upon that a little bit later, but first let's go through some of the points. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was fear and anxiety. Anxiety and fear is very similar, at least the way we perceive it in our body. The only biggest difference that I see on those two topics is fear is more specific. For example, when you have a fear of snake, you know that you're afraid of snakes, so you don't want to go closer to snakes anymore. Whereas anxiety is more sporadic, it's more diffused. So when you have anxiety, you probably sometimes won't even be able to identify the exact reason what is causing the anxiety inside of you. However, the way we perceive fear is very similar to that of anxiety, and the way we react to anxiety is very much similar to that of fear. So in this video, I'm just gonna be referring it to as fear, but I mean anxiety as well. So let's move on to these 3 points that I have for us, and it's gonna clarify more on what fear is and how we can deal with it. So the point number 1 is not all fears are bad. Like I mentioned before, if our ancestors, if they lacked that kind of fear responses in their bodies, we probably wouldn't even be here, because it was that fear response which either caused them to fight or flee the situation when they were facing their enemies, whether it be like wild animals or even maybe, let's say, like extreme natural situations where maybe there was like storm. If they didn't have that kind of fear responses, they would probably be dead, right? And even in our society today too, fear responses are like very good. Actually, if we didn't have our fear responses, we would probably be one of those like psychopaths or sociopaths, because they don't know what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do. Whenever we have fear, we're getting these signals whether to act on certain things or not to act on certain things, whether to fight or to flee. When it comes to fear, there's usually 3 kinds of reactions. Either there's fight, flight, or freeze. And you get to that third stage, which is the worst stage that you could be in. But sometimes what happens is not all these fear responses that we get in our body is actually real. And it's just something that's kind of made up in our own minds. For example, when you're in a social situation, you might just start making all these scenarios in your head. But if you want to probably go and talk to someone who is very much important for you to succeed in your life, whether it be someone who is like a potential romantic mate or a boss who might give you a promotion or a future employer, and you start making all these scenarios in your head and the fears start building up and building up until it gets to a point where you can't even act. You just freeze. It's gonna totally destroy you if you just wanna stay in freeze, because you just lose that ability to respond to any kind of situation from there on. So from here on, I want you to remember this, that fear is just a signal. Whenever you have fear, it's signaling you to either do something or not to do something. And once you have this understanding, you have a more better ability to respond to any kinds of situation. So let's move on to the next point. There is no physiological difference in between fear and excitement. It's only in our minds how we perceive it that's gonna make it either positive or negative. But instead of labeling it as a fear, you could easily label it as excitement, and that way you could be performing much better in any given situations in your life. Let me give you an example on this. Let's say that there's this band who's playing their first sold out show in one of the biggest arenas in the country. The lead singer and the guitar player of the band, they're getting like very similar responses right before they go to the stage and start performing their first song ever, right? But the singer, he gets pumped up and he thinks that's excitement in his body. Whereas the guitar player, he thinks that he's getting anxious now, he's getting afraid, he's getting stage fright. So they both go to the stage, and by the end of the show, for the singer, it's been one of the most phenomenal night. He's been killing it on the stage, right? Whereas for the guitar player, he doesn't even have any memory because he got afraid and he started doing a lot of drinking. And towards the end of the night, he has no memory of whatever happened. That's the difference in between fear and excitement. It's so deceptive sometimes. And most times the power is within you on how you are able to label it as either fear or excitement. So which one are you gonna choose? So let's move on to the third and final point. Slaying the dragon. What does that mean? If you're not familiar with the hero's journey, in every great story or in every great movie that we know of, usually the hero or the protagonist, he has to go through some journey and he has to go through a lot of obstacles, and finally he gets to the point where he has to face the most biggest obstacle of his life ever. And that's the point where he has to slay the dragon. So literally, what slaying the dragon means is that the hero has to finally face his biggest fear of his life. And until and unless he faces this fear, there's no growth for him, there's no rest or peace for him. And this problem has enabled him to go through this long and exciting and also scary journey. And finally it comes to this climax moment where he has to slay the dragon or face his fear and, fight against these villains or whatever, right? Just think about Harry Potter facing Voldemort one-on-one on the last battle. Just think about that. Harry Potter, he's still fearful, but he still chooses to act upon his fear, act in spite of fear. And this is the same way we have to approach our fears, because sometimes if we just listen to our fear, it's just going to hold us back and it's never going to let us succeed. Just take fear as a signal which is helping you to grow. And sometimes you just have to do the exact opposite thing that the fear says. And the biggest mistake that we make is we try to make fear as the enemy. Fear is just a signal, and most times it thinks that it's trying to keep you in a comfort zone. Although it might feel uncomfortable when you're going through this anxiety and fear in your body, but it's still asking you to stay in your comfort zone. So it's trying to make you safe. So it's not bad. Stop trying to fight with the fear itself, but just listen to the fear signal and act in spite of it. And that's when the biggest growth comes in our life. Every successful people, they have to overcome this fear. And there's no way to overcome fear beforehand. The only way you can overcome fear is by acting. And once you act, the fear is just gonna dissolve away. And all of a sudden you feel this intense pleasure and joy in your life. And that's the most victorious moments of our lives. That's the moments that we wanna live for. And if we didn't have fear, there wouldn't be any kind of glorifying moments in our life, If life was so easy, if life was always happy, we probably wouldn't even know the meaning of happiness or pleasures of joy. Most times than not, you know what you need to do, whether it is calling up your potential clients or writing the first page of your book that you want to write, or maybe just calling up the girl of your dreams or the guy of your dreams, maybe just trying to connect with them, Until and unless you take that first step, you're never gonna be satisfied. You probably end up hating yourself if you don't do that. If you just keep distracting yourself with all different things that you think are more important than the actual thing that's causing the problem and fear in your life. So just act upon it. The fear is just gonna dissolve and you're gonna be feeling much more victorious. So to wrap it all up, we talked about the difference in between fear and anxiety, where fear is more focused on one particular thing, whereas anxiety is more diffuse and sometimes you don't know the cause of the anxiety. And after that, we talked about point number 1, where not all fears are bad, because fear is just a part of our human existence. And don't forget that word right there, it's always giving us some kind of signal to act or do something about it. And number 2, fear versus excitement. Sometimes the way we perceive fear and excitement inside of our body is very much similar, especially physiologically, but it's only the way we label it in our minds, whether if you want to take it on a positive or the negative route, it's different. That's why fear and excitement, it could be used interchangeably. Point number 3, we talked about going through the hero's journey, where one has to slay the dragon. And slaying the dragon is basically you facing the biggest fears of your life and just acting in spite of it. And don't fight with the fear, just try to accept the fear as it is and actually try to appreciate the fear for giving you that signal and asking you to do whatever you need to do. So just act in spite of fear, don't submit to the fear. With that being said, guys, let's end this video right here. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comment section below. And I'm also gonna be posting more videos in the future, more awesome contents like this, so please do go ahead and subscribe to this channel and hit that bell notification if you haven't already. And that being said, guys, I'll see you in another video. Goodbye and namaste.